And we're live. Cool. Okay. So
I dig the Disneyland jacket. That's pretty cool. I like your hat too.
Okay. So why don't you take it from here? Because you're a whole lot more knowledgeable about this thing than I am.
So I guess it really started, last week is when a lot of the CarrierIQ stuff really started kind of speeding up, and then through the weekend, and now we're still talking about a lot of it. The Verge actually yesterday, I don't know if you guys read it or not, they published a really in-depth and pretty awesome interview with the CarrierIQ guys that illuminated some issues and maybe cleared up some concerns, but I think probably made some people even more concerned a little bit than that. And are we still live? Or?
I think so. Hold on.
Yeah.
Okay, you can still see us? All right, cool.
Okay, well, this is now recording the screen part.
Oh,
so.
that's true.
Okay, so, sorry, we're trying to record this so we can publish this later. So, the big thing with CarrierIQ is that it's preloaded onto a lot of phones. You can't really get rid of it. It can potentially record a lot of data, and people are pretty freaked out and understandably a little bit pissed about what's happening with it. So what we'd kind of like to know is what do you guys think? And do you think it's as big of a deal as the media's been making it out to be, or do you think that it's understandable that for diagnostic purposes people need to, that people with phone carriers need to be able to track what's happening on your device so that they can try to fix problems? What do you think?
I think it's a serious issue because with all the privacy concerns, it should be like an opt-in or opt-out option for everyone.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's really valid, Joe. I think that's a really good point, and I think that's actually one of the bigger problems that we're kind of having with a lot of this right now is that it is not opt-in or opt-out. Apple makes it clear that you can opt out of sending the diagnostic information, and that they say they're going to remove it completely from their devices. And Windows Phone 7, it looks like they don't have CarrierIQ at all. But if you've got a device that runs on AT&T, T-Mobile, Sprint, or I think Rogers in Canada, and it's on your phone, there's really not a whole lot you can do about it. And I think that's probably the biggest problem. What was interesting in the Verge interview yesterday was that when they were asked directly about whether or not it should be an opt-in or opt-out process, CarrierIQ was very careful not to say, oh, we think it should be opt-in or opt-out. They were like, we don't think that's our decision to make. Clearly, they wouldn't want it to be opt-in, because if it's opt-in, no one would opt-in. But what's also interesting is, their customer is not us. We're not CarrierIQ's customers. They don't care anything about us. Their customer is AT&T. Their customer is T-Mobile. Their customer is Sprint. I don't know. I think what to me is most interesting is that a lot of people seem to have been unaware that the phone companies have all this information and data about them. I don't know about you guys, but I've always just kind of assumed that everything I do on my phone is being recorded by someone somewhere.
Paranoid?
No, just knowing how this stuff works. My fiance used to work for a third-party contractor that they worked actually in T-Mobile's headquarters, and they had access to a tremendous amount of billing data and information. And I think it's just kind of one of those realities of how they track things. But I think as we become more aware of what we use our phones for and how tied they are to things, I think it becomes a lot scarier. For you guys, yeah.
I know it's a lot of the iOS devices, but folks like going up to the Nexus S, and they're saying that it's not in. So why have some decided to go for
why is it on some phones and not on others?
right?
Well, because it comes down to what CarrierIQ says is that for some phones, they can get them what's called pre-certified, so they'll ship with the software on it. Other times, the software has to be installed by the by the phone carrier, so your wireless provider would have to load it on the phone. And then sometimes it takes a while for them to build a profile that can be downloaded over the air. So what CarrierIQ was actually saying to The Verge yesterday was that in some cases they can issue like an over-the-air update that might be
Hold on for 1 second. Guys, can everyone hear us okay? I see a few people in the chat are saying that we have an echo.
Well, you guys know, but whenever somebody talks, we hear the echo, I think, on your screen.
Oh, right, because we're not using microphone. Gotcha. Sorry about that.
Okay. You know what? People are now saying in chat that if everyone else mutes when you're not talking or when we're talking, it should help you guys out a bit. All right? Cool.
Sorry about that, guys.
As you were. Just wanted to make sure everyone could hear.
So anyway, what The Verge was saying in their interview yesterday is that actually what can happen is if your phone carrier issues an update to your handset, like on your Nexus S or whatever, there's the possibility that you could download something from your carrier that would then have CarrierIQ on it. So I think that's really the biggest thing, is that they only have so many device profiles, and they're able to get it pre-installed on a certain number of handsets and a certain number of devices, but then the rest of it is up to the carrier to actually install it. And then what was interesting too is that CarrierIQ was pointing out that they're not the only service that's running on the phone, that there could be dozens, like 40 different services running on the phone that all report different information and diagnostic information to your carrier. So I think that it's interesting that they're kind of, the target right now, which makes sense because they're the ones whose name is on their code and the video that Trevor Eckert made, but they're far from the only ones who are doing, I guess we could call it data mining or diagnostic mining information on phones, and the carriers have access to a ton of this kind of information. What's interesting too is that a lot of people think, oh, well, is this only limited to smartphones? When actually this started before smartphones were prevalent. It was started on feature phones, and that's how they got kind of into the embedded system thing and why it's different from being an app per se, because it was before you were downloading apps on phones. And it was then, in that case, very much about a diagnostics thing. So I'm in a certain area and my phone fails, or I'm not able to send or receive, text messages, or an MMS doesn't go through correctly. And then try to, go through the logs and see, well what process failed and maybe what was the point of conflict. Whereas now, because we're using so many more things on our phones, and when it can conceivably get devices like what URL were you at, or what were you typing, or what app were you using, or what app were you downloading, then I think people get a lot more freaked out.
Yeah. I mean, before when it was just like, oh, what are you doing for dinner? Texting a friend, it wasn't a big a deal. When you're like, oh, I can pay my cable bill on my phone.
That's actually my biggest concern with it. It's not so much that it's creepy to know that they could know everybody you're texting, talking to, and whatnot. But again, like I said, your phone carrier's going to do that always. They have a log of everything. And I think as the news of the world scandal kind of proved to us, it's remarkably easy in some parts of the world, more than others, to get access to voicemails and to get carriers and people to turn that stuff over. It's remarkably easy. But the bigger problem for me is that, okay, so how secure is the information and the data that they're collecting being transferred back to the carrier? So it's one thing that if you're saying, okay, you're collecting this information, it's completely, just for diagnosis purposes, it's not going to be directly tied to me unless it goes through some other route, but how secure is that information being transmitted? And if there's private information or secure stuff like my credit card number or password or something else, if that's being transferred in an unencrypted way to their servers, could someone else hack into that stream and get access to that data? And that was the one question that CarrierIQ really hasn't been very forthcoming about, is in terms of they're saying, no, well, our stuff is secure, but you don't really know how secure the other processes that might have access to that same information that are also running on the phone are. So I don't know, it kind of becomes, Julian Assange from WikiLeaks was saying how easy it is for anybody to hack into anyone else's phone, and it's, yeah.
Yeah, with so many privacy issues. Why can't CarrierIQ be hacked into as well?
Yeah, no, and that's a really good point. And I think that what they were kind of pointing out is that the information can be stored one of two places. It can have to be stored on the data centers that the wireless carriers have, or they can have their own data centers. And then sometimes the wireless carrier will own the hardware, but it will be stored in CarrierIQ's data centers. But in most cases, it's being controlled and actively used not by CarrierIQ. They're very much not connected unless they are in a permanent on-site contracting position, in which case they're really practically working for the carrier, not for CarrierIQ, or being accessed through a dashboard from the telecom companies. And I will say, and this isn't going to make anybody feel any better, it certainly doesn't make me feel any better, but knowing from my fiance's past work experience, it's remarkable how insecure some of those systems are within the phone companies. At T-Mobile, it was something right before Grant left, they finally started to use SSH for something that really should have been used for years, and even then T-Mobile's response is, it doesn't really matter. They have really good redundant servers, and a lot of their processes were probably pretty hard to hack into, but a lot of their internal kind of data sharing policies, especially with the third-party contractors and other people on their systems, it doesn't make me feel any better. I'm not saying this to freak anyone out, but I think that this whole situation kind of underscores what's the reality has been for a really long time, that we just haven't known it necessarily.
Right. Does anyone else have a question about CarrierIQ, or does it affect them, or just just curious about what they can get a hold of through this. Anyone? Who's talking? Raise your hand. Is that not someone talking to us? Is that just background noise?
I think that's Ivan.
Ivan?
Ah,
Yeah, Ivan's right there.
yeah.
What up, Ivan?
All right, cool.
Cool.
Yeah,
Yeah, Charlie Bell's like, I have an Nexus 1, so I'm fine.
I'm sorry, there was a delay. I was going to ask something. What do you think this CarrierIQ controversy? Do you guys think that? Do you think there's going to be any fallout as far as like Facebook and Google Plus network and things like that? I'm really uncomfortable data collection controversy.
So your question is what you think about the fallout in terms of how it relates to like the Google's data collection stuff and Facebook's and some of the past controversies like with Buzz and things like that?
Exactly.
Yeah, I think that I think
Not, what the
Your sound isn't very high. We can't hear you very well. That's the problem. If you if
microphone check.
there we
Awesome.
go.
Well, I have a camera microphone, but it doesn't work as well.
Cool. So could you just repeat the last part of your question? Sorry.
No, I was just wondering what you guys thought about. God, I can't even say this because I'm echoing so badly.
We can hear you just fine.
Yeah, but
But everyone else
It's
is
in my
saying, I'm
ears.
sorry about that.
no, I was just thinking what you guys and other people thought about this data collection being an issue with Facebook and Google Plus.
Yeah, I think that it certainly becomes a much bigger issue. I think that's part of why the CarrierIQ thing gained so much steam. It's like I was saying to I was on CNN earlier this week, and when I was talking to the producer about the segment, I said, this is kind of a perfect storm because it combines three issues that have been a big part of the second half of 2011. One being kind of the location privacy aspect of using your phone, like what happened with Apple's Location Gate and some of the other phone manufacturers. Then the whole phone hacking thing with the News of the World and kind of how much information from your phone can be gleaned and what the effects of that are. And then the biggest thing, and I think that this is the one that really relates to what you're saying, is the various privacy or lack thereof of services like Facebook and Google Plus and the data collection policies that are contained within those services. Now, the one good thing about CarrierIQ is that they are bound by, and it's not really, they have no choice in this. To operate in the business that they operate in, they are bound by certain legal data collection policies they're set at a federal level and are mandated at a telecommunications level by the FCC, that all the FCC requires all the telecommunications carriers to abide by when it comes to data collection policies and when it comes to data retention policies. And in order to operate in that space and to work with the telecommunication operators, CarrierIQ or anyone else who does anything with that has to follow very set legal standards. Those standards are a lot more strict than what you have with things like Facebook or Google Plus, where the regulations are actually pretty limited in terms of that, and that's something that some lobbyists have pushed for greater stringency on how much information can be collected and how it can be stored. But the phone operators have to be extremely careful about how that information is stored, at least in the United States. Now, this can be different in other countries, and that's actually one of the reasons that what happened with News of the World probably be less likely to happen in the United States, at least to the extent that it happened there, because the data collection policies are incredibly strict. But I think what this highlights is that we're giving a tremendous amount of information to all kinds of parties, and we don't necessarily know how much we can trust them. And I think that it opens up this thought of, if we're worried about a company that's ostensibly working for a telecommunications operator who has legal reasons and very set policies in place to keep things safe, and if we're having a hard time trusting them, and I think it's totally fair to have a hard time trusting them, then what about all the information that we're giving, or maybe even knowingly, unknowingly giving to social networks, and also maybe even leaking through when we're using their mobile applications? Facebook,
Yeah, I mean, I don't know about anybody else, but where I live, I'm allowed to use Wi-Fi to get back, so I don't have a direct connection to any ISP, and I wonder how that might affect users like me.
Yeah, no, I think that's really interesting. So you're using like public Wi-Fi? Is that how you connect?
No, this is an open private, our neighbors are like 2 miles away from each other, so nobody else can pick it up.
Okay, so you're using like a mesh sort of network sort of thing.
No, he's on Comcast.
Oh, okay.
And I'm just using an antenna to pick it up.
Okay. Yeah, no, I mean, ostensibly, you know, Comcast could be picking up, I guess, the data that you're kind of using too. But again, they have really strict data collection policies of what they're supposed to do. I mean, that's the point of net neutrality, which is a little bit different, is more about making sure you have a solid connection no matter what source your content's coming from. But another part of that is also associated with data security and information privacy. But at the ISP level, but when it comes to the individual service level, I mean, it depends on the security of the connection and I guess whatever they're running on their end. But I mean, by and large, I think that what, at least to me, what this kind of highlights is that we're all sharing a lot more information than we're aware of with a bunch of different services, and it's
Absolutely.
you know, and I think it's a good thing. I think that that's why people get freaked out, because they think about the fact that, wait a minute, you know, I'm giving this information out, I don't have any way necessarily to control it. And I think that the best thing, and I don't know about you guys, but I think the best thing that can come from this controversy would be if people could become more aware and enforce companies, whether they're big telecom operators or they're services like Google Plus or Facebook, to say, we are going to have a really set policy when it comes to collecting and hoarding information, and we're going to be checked for security audits, and we're going to do what we can to make things better. I mean, there's no telling that that'll be, there's nothing that's foolproof. Look at the Sony PlayStation hack. It's a perfect example of, you think that a billion-dollar multinational company would have a really secure way of storing information. They didn't, and that was, excuse my language, but that was a clusterfuck of epic proportions. There's no other way to say that. It was just an absolute disaster. But I think that it's just sort of one of those things that we should all be more aware of what we're sharing, and put pressure on companies to be looking out for us more than just looking out for themselves.
Absolutely. Privacy is always a concern for even people that aren't on the internet.
Yeah, without a doubt. I think that yeah, absolutely. I mean, even if you're not online, if you think about just when you hand your credit card over when you're at a restaurant, that's something that's kind of an unconnected way of losing our privacy. But I think what's it being online, and just the fact that so much of our personal information is now stored, especially on our phones. I think that's what makes the CarrierIQ thing so scary, is that I know from experience, when I've lost my phone before, it's like I lost my life. Like, I had to immediately go out and get another one, because even though it actually came back to me weirdly, but it was one of those things where I felt violated in a weird sense, because I'd lost my phone and I'd lost so much of a part of my communication system. And so I think the fact that someone has access, even if it's indirectly, and even if they're not going to use it for anything, to the stuff that we're doing on our phones and the communications that are taking place and the activity that's taking place, it's a creepy feeling.
Mm-hmm. Interesting story about that for something like this. I have a friend who had their iPhone stolen just around the streets of New York, and they got a call from that number on their. Well, they got a call from a number they didn't know, because they ported their number. Everything was fine on a different phone. They said, "Hi, I have your iPhone. I bought it in Chinatown. I'm not going to give it back to you because I paid for it, but if you give me the password, I'll send you all your contacts and all their information."
Wow.
And so, what would happen in a situation like that to this poor girl that I know that all of a sudden was like, "I'm not paying you for the information on my phone.
Right.
And if I give you my password, you can get everything I own."
Yeah.
And so if that new person does something on their phone with that information now, that still goes through. It seems like an odd situation.
Well, I think with the CarrierIQ stuff, what they've said is that if you change your SIM card, or if you change your subscriber number, then it's no longer identified with that person anymore.
Okay.
It's based on, basically how they identify things is based on two things, based on phone number and then based on IMEI device.
That makes sense.
Which is the IMEI code is it's IMEI. It's basically a little code that's connected to your phone that uniquely identifies that phone as yours. Mm-hmm. And so if it was a SIM card,
there's no SIM card in the iPhone.
There's a SIM card in the app. Well, with Verizon, what you would have to do is it would have to be deactivated and reactivated under a different user ID. So then all that new information would be taken. Now, one better thing about CarrierIQ is that even though they say they can store the data for up to 30 days, which is kind of a standard data retention policy, it's pretty much worthless after 3 or 4 days.
Mm-hmm.
And it kind of rolls over. So the chances are is that if you sold your phone to someone else, they started using it, it gave a few updates, that would pretty much disappear in terms of, it would be associated then with a different customer ID and not with your information anymore.
Thanks for the link, Bobby Joe. That's really good information to have.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. That's one of my favorite features of the Find My iPhone thing. You can remotely wipe, and I know Motorola has that too. Motorola has that as well, and so does I think Windows Phone. I know BlackBerry does that, and that's one of the best features. Is that if anybody ever steals your phone, do a remote wipe, and then they can, no one else is going to be able to.
Everybody wave. It looks like he may be taking. Oh wait.
Oh yeah, he took out a SIM card. Nice.
That's cool. I thought you were taking a picture. Wait,
That's very cool.
you could show that to everyone. We'll make you bigger. So
I only grabbed this is an older model, but
then Joe Martinez has a question in the comments
Sure.
afterwards.
Pop it out again. So I designed wireless networks, and we use various different kinds of tools to understand and manage the network. If you guys have any questions about how these guys use that technology, there's just some card.
Cool.
Awesome.
Anyway, so if you have any questions about how they might use this particular software, probably answer it for you.
Yeah, so I have a question for you. What are they basically doing? Are you trying to figure out if there's a certain drop in a certain location based on like frequencies of the radio? Is that basically what they're mostly pinging? Is the radio aspect of the phone, or what? Do you know?
Okay, so somebody's somebody in here. Who's that? Hang on.
Yeah, it's an old issue. We haven't resolved it.
Yeah. I'm gonna check the settings really quickly just to make sure we have that done. Sorry.
I'll just turn my volume down.
Yeah, we have. Yeah, we've got echo cancellation. Fine. So.
So when you
Just wanted to
drop
make sure it
call,
wasn't
you drop
us.
call for a couple of reasons. One can be for capacity, the network's free capacity, and it can't drag any more calls, so you hand it from one site to the next, you move to the next site, and it's tagged. More often than not, the reason you drop call, and you can also drop call because you have insufficient coverage. So you move outside of the coverage area, there's insufficient coverage, and you drop call because the call can't continue. Oftentimes, the reason you drop call is because there's too much noise in the network.
Okay.
So every single wireless network has to use its frequencies. They buy a block frequency in the band, and they have to reuse those frequencies in order to make the network work efficiently.
Hi.
My little engineer here. So they have to reuse the frequencies over and over again, and what happens is sites interfere with one another. So that's the most common reason to drop call. The reason that they would want to look at the network activity to see what's going on, both with respect to what the call looks like, what the dimension of the call looks like, what someone might be typing, what's going on, is so they get a pretty clear picture about what's happening. Now the funny thing is, as engineers, we don't really have time to go back and look at all the data in there. In fact, they're recording all the stuff in your phone. No one has any time to look at it. There's millions of users, and unless you are an engineer working in the switch and happen to be stalking someone in particular, no one has public access to that kind of information. So it's kind of, they open the whole thing up so you can look at any of the information from the call. It helps dimension the network, helps us to understand what's going on in the network. But the likelihood of someone using it for a nefarious reason is reasonably small.
That's really interesting to hear, Mike. Appreciate you saying that. And I'm sorry about the.
Christina, I muted you because you guys are the ones causing the echo while Robert was talking. So
Yes.
Really?
Yeah. That
when
which
other
makes complete
people are
sense.
talking, maybe you just mute and then it would solve the problem. Sorry.
Okay.
No. Yes, that's what we need to do. Sorry,
We
we
have
have
to
to mute
press the
ourselves
button,
when you guys
the
are
red
talking.
button.
We're
You gotta
stupid.
unmute yourself.
Christina, unmute yourself. There's a red button above you.
Oh, genius.
Ah,
Okay,
okay.
thank you. Sorry about that,
So
guys.
when other people are talking, you guys mute, that solves the issue.
We're okay.
We're slow.
Yeah. Oops.
I've only been hanging out since June 29th, almost every day. No problem.
Well, thank you for sharing that with us. That's really, really fascinating, I think. And I guess that if I could ask you a question, I mean, and I kind of feel the same way you do, I think. Are you concerned with the fact that you're collecting this information, or because you understand that no one's ever going to have any time to go through it, you think it's maybe a lot of hubbub over nothing?
That's a great question. I can see both sides of that argument. I mean, whether or not anyone should have access to your private data or your private communication, I think that's a pretty easy one. I don't think people should. However, when you look at it from an engineering standpoint, it's just a matter of, how do you go back and filter it versus you just accept it or not accept it. And basically what they said was, open the net up, capture everything that we need to go back and look at it. Okay, hang on a second. The funny thing is, as engineers, we don't really have time to go back and look at data in depth, but what we do is we look at large volumes of data and look at traffic patterns and look at different kinds of information. So probably the decision was made, you know what, just go grab everything, and if we need it or we need to look at those data sets later and try to display or dimension them or map them, we'll have everything to look at. So I'm pretty sure that it wasn't done for nefarious reasons. Your pants came about.
No.
Hang on a second, wardrobe malfunction. There you go. Better? So, I don't think it was done for nefarious reasons. I don't think the intent was that. And in fact, until someone pointed it out, it's more than likely that people that were looking at the data may or may not even have noticed it. And quite frankly, the guys are so busy doing what they're doing again, unless there was a particular engineer at the switch who knew someone and wanted to snoop on their stuff, which would be illegal. And everyone who works in that industry understands those boundaries. I don't think it's an issue, but I do understand where people go, wait a second, how can these guys be looking at my stuff? But we've had the ability from the beginning of time, from the beginning of switches, from the beginning of wireless, to be able to snoop, if you want to call it that, on particular lines. You can patch right into a particular transmission. We don't do it because it doesn't matter what you're talking about. It's not interesting. No one is really that interesting, or you don't go chasing people around. Again, it's illegal. You're not allowed to wiretap. So it's not done in the industry, or at least I've never seen it done.
So if you can unmute us.
Unmuted.
I think that's really important to point out, and I agree completely. And that's something I've kind of said is that we've been able to do this, and this information has been able to be captured. It just might be illegal. I think where people get freaked out again is with the whole Sony thing. You trust that they're going to follow certain correct data storing procedures, that they're going to have things protected in a certain way. And what happens when a security system is breached and they get access to all this stuff? And while understanding, if you break into a data center at a phone carrier like AT&T, granted, there are a lot more things that are at risk that are probably easier to grab and to go through and to grab through than a CarrierIQ database. But I guess my question would be, understanding the engineering realities of why you want to collect all that data, and understanding that it's not being intended to be used for nefarious purposes, and that it would take an outside person, or an inside person rather, with a specific agenda to go through it. If that system were to be compromised and someone were to have access to those logs, and able to go through them and take the time to find things, doesn't that still create a risk of keeping that information just because it's easier to grab everything rather than to grab specific things?
Theoretically, absolutely. It does create a risk that someone could, go back in time and say, okay, I want to look at this person's transmissions and understand what's going on. The carriers are keeping track of those data sets. Again, are very large and they're kind of difficult and unwieldy. I do mapping sets of the entire United States of the broadband, so I do maps of whole carriers and compare the networks and look at what they do. Those are huge sets of data. When you look at those kinds of sets of data, and even when you start collecting all of the other data that these guys are talking about, it's such a large volume of data, unless you had a way to go in and specifically search for certain things, which doesn't mean it's necessarily in the data. It's just what we want to look at, for example, is if we have a sector that we want to optimize, we'll go and we'll see a trouble spot. So we have a site that has a particular sector, and we're having notorious trouble there. We want to determine if it's frequency-based, if it's call load based, and so we might go look at a period of time and go back and say, let's go back and play back what's going on in this sector and find out if somebody or we have 3 people downloading movies, what's going on there, how do we look at that? The only way we can do that, the way we've done it in the past, is we send crews out. I used to have 140 employees that would travel around the country with big sets of equipment, and they were the "Can you hear me now" guys. We were actually going out and dimensioning the networks. What we have now is this kind of software which allows everyone to give feedback to the network so we can go back and look at it and dimension it. Again, I don't think the intent was nefarious. I completely understand the privacy issue because I think people's privacy should be protected. I think they're making a little bit out of something that's not there. How that information and data would be compromised because it's such a large volume of data, it's not something that's easily transportable. When it goes in the switch, it's not typically available to the rest of the network, which means it doesn't float around in places where you could typically hack into. You have to be an employee of the company in the switch breaking the law in order to get access to that in the most typical fashion. Once the data comes out, once we look at the call lines, and once we look at the data sets, we're looking at raw data. We're looking at how much information was passed, what happened in the network in that particular instance. We don't care what Harry said to Sally. It's not part of what we have time to deal with. So I don't know. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, it does.
I got a question for Robert.
Yeah, Robert.
Secure that information. How insecure is it?
Well, okay, so typically what happens inside of a wireless carrier is that they have an operations floor. The operations floor contains engineers, site acquisition people, and people that build the network, zoning people, legal people, office people. So it's your basic office. That office has a person at the front door. The front door has, usually you have to get past the desk and go through a locked door to get to the office floor. So in order to be on the office floor, to be in the office, you have to have very specific permission to get on that floor. In particular, and this is interesting, because unions have made an effort to unionize telecommunications employees, they've further restricted movement into that space, because if you let your buddy N come in, then you have to let a union rep come in to talk to those people. So they further restricted that area to, you can only get in that area if you have very specific business to do in that area. So there's your level one. Level two is, within the switch, you have to have either a specific key code or a swipe card to get into the switch area. People that work on the main floor do not get access to the switch. The only people that have access to the switch are the people who work in the switch, and on occasion, the wireless engineers that go into the switch to look at specific information. The information that we're talking about here is contained within that area, so you have a double lockdown. It doesn't have outside network access, which means I can't sit at home, and I'm saying typically. I assume that someone could screw this up, but it's not designed to be that way. Someone sitting at home, a little sec hacker that wants to play around, he's going to have a pretty tough time getting into that switch information, getting access to that database, being able to query that database, pull that data down, and again figure out what Harry's saying is valid. It's just not. It's not the way the system's designed to have easy access to that information. I'm not saying there isn't a better way that they could do it, or they could mask or not pull information. It's just these guys looked at the data and said, you know what, if we can pull data from a phone, which includes location, which is incredibly important when we're talking about dimensioning a network, the receive CRK and UPNO, which is how much signal we're getting back versus how much noise, and what kind of traffic is going over that network. Now, the only thing we do is translate the kind of traffic that's going across the network into something that's not recognizable. But one of the important things to understand would be, if someone's sending a message, did the message go through clearly? Again, we don't have time to go back and say, did the message go through clearly? That's not what we do. They're just saying, go capture all that stuff and we'll figure out how to use it later. Still trying to map all of that information is an incredible headache, because it's a lot of information that has to get processed. Sorry I talked much.
No.
No.
No, I was going to say, Robert, thank you so much, because I think that's really what you've done. Is you made me personally feel a lot better. Not that I understood, I think, fundamentally a lot of what you were saying, but just hearing you talk about the process certainly makes the likelihood of anyone using or even having the time to do anything with CarrierIQ for bad, I think, is certainly you've alleviated those concerns. I think that the broader issue, and I think we can all kind of agree with this, is that this raises concerns in all of our minds as far as what we're putting out there and how accessible that information is. And I think that becomes really kind of the problem with all of this. It's not so much that the data can even be accessed or that can be used for negative reasons. It's just the fact that we're putting all this information out there and what's being done with it.
I will say this, I think CarrierIQ was probably a little bit lazy and a little bit inconsiderate in the way they put the system together. They should have said, look, all we really want is the phone location and the receive level of what that phone is doing, and maybe look at and try to dimension how much data is moving through that system, whether it's voice or data doesn't really matter, or text doesn't matter. But instead of saying we'll grab everything. And so, maybe they made a poor choice, and probably even when they made a poor choice, they made a poor choice of saying, we're not collecting it and it doesn't matter anyway. What they were trying to say is what I said,
Right.
but what it came across as, oh, we're not doing that, but then it turns out they are. So, again, I think they should have been a little more cognizant of how people would feel about that versus, the reality of what they use it for. It's not like anyone has time to sit around and listen to everyone's conversation. There's a lot of stuff going across the network, and it moves fast. So.
No, and I think that you bring out.
You're muted.
Sorry. No, I was going to say, yeah, no, I think you bring up a great point. Yeah, they were probably lazy with some of their collection methods. They probably shouldn't have been grabbing everything that they were. And certainly I think that their PR state first of sending out the cease and desist and then, being really vague with some of their answers and really kind of dodging some other issues, I think certainly is not helped their cause at all. But the fact that they've kind of become this harbinger for this bigger issue isn't necessarily their fault, although they certainly could have helped themselves in other ways. But I thank you so much, Robert, for speaking with us because this has been so helpful. I mean, if you have time later, actually, I'd love to get with you to talk to you. Maybe we could do some sort of interview and you could talk to us so we could share with our readers as a whole more of this sort of information because I think it'd be really useful for people to hear from somebody who actually knows what he's talking about and not just people like me who just are pundits. That'd be awesome. Awesome. Cool. Well, if no one else has any questions,
Thank you.
Yeah, Google Plus
Sorry.
is seriously amazing. You're right. No, this has been so good.
Yeah.
This has been awesome. This has been so helpful. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Do anyone else who's been here for a while or who just joined in have any other questions about CarrierIQ or anything Google Plus?
I was just going to say that the press seems to be fear-mongering the public.
Yeah.
It just seems that every time I've heard about it, they are focusing on the negative. Robert's really put in so many great points about, how they're going to use that data, how accessible that data is, how readable that data is, and who's, I obviously missed part of the conversation, who access to that data. I mean, is it people who I'm going to trust? Or, or is it something that is hackable? There's always that little piece in the back of your mind, are people going to hack into, PlayStation Network and stuff like that?
Dolly, people that are even nerdier than you and I are, by a factor of 3, 1, and those people realize that if they start digging through information that they should not have access to, they're going to lose their job. So why would an engineer sit there and start listening to your phone call and risk his $90,000 or $180,000 a year job just to find out what he's saying about someone?
And their pension and healthcare.
No, exactly, and I think that those are great points. I mean, I think that then we obviously have to put our trust that the telecommunications industry is being a lot more stringent than the PlayStation Network when it comes to data protection and to keeping those systems secure. And admittedly, that becomes harder when you have tons and tons of external companies and outside contractors working within your own data space, and sometimes using your data center, sometimes using their own, sometimes having their own VPN setups, and sometimes having separate. It can get a lot more complex, but I think that, as Robert was pointing out earlier, there are a lot of layers of security to get through to get to the main data hose, and certainly there are easier ways, I guess, to. It seems like to disrupt the world than to try to break into AT&T.
Collecting data this way has sort of been the holy grail of what the industry has been looking for a while, because they build and dimension and extend their networks based on user input. We built a company, like I said, 140 people that used to drive around SUVs with lots of antennas on top to collect data. We still do things like that. But by and large now, we look at the handsets, because now we have smart handsets versus the ones we started out with in 97 and the digital, the beginning of the PCS days. We have handsets now that can give us real-time active feedback about what's going on in the network. So the CarrierIQ is basically going out there and using that information, grabbing it, and saying, how can we look at what's going on in the network so we can more effectively design and build the network? Ultimately, the customer wants a good product on the other end, and on the other side of it, they don't want anybody to look at their stuff. But I don't know, I guess the easiest thing to say is, and I really do understand the consumer angst about this. I understand why people would be concerned. I certainly wouldn't want someone looking through my stuff, although they would probably be bored to tears. But privacy is privacy, and I believe people deserve their privacy. I don't believe people's information should be exposed or shared or maybe it's unfortunate that I've said this because now the hackers are going, oh, okay, maybe I can't, maybe he says I can't get in there, maybe I should try. Not saying it's impossible, not saying it's not going to happen. It's fairly unlikely, and it's not designed for that kind of open trade. Which is not to say it couldn't happen. It is a valid concern. They should look at, what can they do to limit what they're looking at to satisfy that idea so that it's in there, or they need to step up and say, look, the following's in place. And the industry has been very careful. If you look back in the last 12 to 15 years of this industry, how many times has user data been stolen and come out of a switch? How many times has user data been stolen and come out of a carrier? How many times has T-Mobile or AT&T gone out to their customer base and said, hey, by the way, all of your emails were stolen, all of your texts have been stolen? It's happened, but it's only happened when people hack individual phones. So
yeah, well, okay, I will say, to be completely fair, when the iPad database was hacked into, AT&T's iPad database was hacked into, my information and UDID was stolen because AT&T are morons, and that kid from Encyclopedia Dramatica, Ween or whatever his name was, broke into that set. So, I mean,
so the question would be, where did iPad data live? Did it live on Apple's side or AT&T?
It was on AT&T's side. AT&T lost the whole customer database of everybody's unique identifier ID for iPads that were on their network, as well as email address and other stuff. They didn't get the billing data, but they got everything else.
Ooh, that's bad.
Yeah. Yeah. The kid is in jail now, but yeah, that was pretty bad. This is yet another reason I was angry with AT&T. But yeah. But I think that was probably an example of how they stored that information separately from the regular information, likely because they associated it with a different sort of software thing and just didn't go through all the right channels. So, I mean, you're certainly right. It's certainly less likely that it's going to get hacked, and it's probably more secure than a lot of other industries because, let's face it, there is a huge financial incentive for them to not screw up and to make things secure and keep things audited. But yeah, I think that what this just kind of has pointed out to all of us, and it's as unlikely as any of these scenarios might be, the reality is we're putting a lot of stuff out there, and how much we can or can't limit what that is, I think, becomes kind of a broader philosophical discussion. But it's certainly been interesting to at least understand, thanks to you, Robert, the technical stuff behind it.
Yeah.
The carriers take their network security very seriously. If they didn't, if it was easily breachable, they'd be losing, they'd be hemorrhaging customers left and right. And they understand that. So I know inside the system, they take it very seriously. No one walks into that switch unless they're authorized to be there. The people that are in there realize and understand the responsibility that they have for protecting the data and the privacy of the people. They understand the law. That's why they're sitting there using that information. So I don't know if that provides any comfort. I do understand why people would be upset. But it is what it is. I think CarrierIQ needs to go back and address some of the issues and see what they can do to further limit the information that the engineer at the other end actually needs. I don't need access to know what someone typed on an email or in a text. It doesn't mean anything to me. I need basic data sets, and that they can deliver that without the other than everyone is.
You're awesome. You're awesome.
Tell them again because you were muted.
Sorry, I said you're awesome. You're fantastic. Thank you so much. You've certainly made me feel better. I think everybody else in the chat is really thankful for you. And like I said, we're going to send you an email later because I'd love to, if you wouldn't mind, I'd love to talk to you further so that we can bring this to a broader Mashable readership, because I think that this is really great.
Definitely.
And this is yet another reason why Google Plus.
Robert Anderson is a Google Plus celebrity.
Yes.
I'm on Google Plus, so I'm not sure where to find it. Hey guys,
we'll send you a message right after this is over. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Very nice to meet you. Take care.
Good meeting you.
Wonderful meeting everyone. Thank you so much
Thanks for hanging
joining
out.
us. And yeah, you guys are great.
Take care then.
Bye.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Wow. That was really, really good.
That was awesome. Were you guys listening in?
Yeah, it sounded like they had a lot of really good stuff.
We had an actual network.
Who's that guy that knew all this stuff?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. We actually had a guy who works as a network administrator and building out the cable networks and security stuff, who knows how this stuff works. Basically, was able to calm everyone down and explain at a technical level what information they're looking for, how it works, and how hard it would be, and how hard it would be to get stuff like that.
Wow.
So
Yeah.
it's pretty safe then.
Yeah, I mean,
From what he's saying.
I mean,
I don't have a problem.
No, I mean he agrees that it's creepy like the rest of us, but which has kind of been our general mean, which is we been trying not to freak people out too much.
Yeah.
But you know, it's like, yeah, okay, this is creepy, and they maybe need to adjust some of their policies. But by and large, it's really hard for anybody to break into stuff.
Really, it's so complex.
Yeah, exactly.
There's
And
like 3 levels of like
yeah,
passes and like. It's like
yeah. No, that was like a really great.
Yeah.
That was very, very much kismet for him to be there. Like I said, I want to send him a
Yeah.
message.
I find like, but there's always one person that like brings it around to these things every time I've done them.
No, that was really useful. No, I'm gonna send him a message on
Yeah.
or if you can find out his name for me or
Yeah,
whatever.
it's easy. There's always like a thing of people who were in this
Who were in
chat
that
who
hangout, okay.
hung out with you, and I'll
Okay,
ping
cool.
ping it over to you.
Awesome. That'd be
Awesome.
great.
Thank you
Thanks,
so
guys.
much.
Yeah, thank you. Well done.
Yeah.
Yay! Yay, community!
Yay!
Yay!
Good news.